Hello and welcome back to the show. This is your host, Blackstone Joe, bringing you episode 46. This one is called On the Money. No, it's not a betting podcast. I don't have any tips or tricks for you on point spreads or parlays, at least not right now because I'm working. And yes, on the side, I'm known to engage in the joys of sports betting, pretending I know more than Vegas odds makers, TV prognosticators, your dedicated fan in general. No, right now it's about oil. It's about oil analysis, finding the problem, identifying what to do next. And we have a great example of a situation where a customer relayed back to us how the findings helped them find and fix a problem. So we're going to get into the exact engine, the findings, all that good stuff. Before I dive into the main event, we have a couple of, let's just say, updates that I want to keep people aware of. First and foremost, a preview of what's to come. So in the works, we have a couple of Meet the Analyst segments. We're in the process of, scheduling and finding out availability. And yeah, these are things we have to do before we, pull someone out of the building and record a podcast, because as I so often find myself saying, we are busier than ever. That's thanks to a dedicated customer base, a constantly increasing volume of samples, and we are always doing things in the building to try and accommodate this growing, ever-present influx of samples. We are making adjustments in-house, and one key adjustment is having to do with shipping. So we totally understand some of the frustration that's out there about how long it can take samples to make their way to our door. We're very good at processing once a sample arrives, provided that you've included payment info and there's no confusion on who the sample belongs to. If paperwork's squared away and we know who's paying and we have everything we need to proceed with an analysis and send you the report, the turnaround time has been about 7 business days for a while. But one thing that has slowed down considerably ever since the start of the pandemic is shipping, the actual getting the sample from you to us. And yeah, we are very empathetic, sympathetic, all the edicts to this change in time. And as a result, we're happy to report that we recently made a change to our oil analysis kits that really seem to have drastically improved how long it takes the post office to get samples back to us. So here's the deal. Instead of just having the black mailer with the label and putting it in the mailbox, what we're going to be doing now is having that black mailer in a Tyvek envelope. And putting the mailer in the envelope seems like a really small, perhaps, extra step that you wouldn't have to do. And believe it or not, merely putting the black mailers in these Tyvek envelopes, just so far, what we've been seeing is that these samples will arrive to us no longer than 3 days. Now, put the asterisk next to that in the sense that, okay, if you're shipping from Alaska or something, allow a little bit of leeway on that. But so far, on average, we've been seeing about 3 days of time from the sample being sent from you to us. And that should make a huge difference because we understand that when you're sending us these samples, especially, if it's a pre-buy or you're an aircraft owner, you're trying to see if it's safe to fly, time is of the essence. And we're very cognizant of that. So we're making these adjustments. So black mailer in the Tyvek envelope, that's a huge change, and we expect that that will really be helpful to all of you. All right, it's time to dive into the main event. So I was looking at a sample the other day. This one came from a Volvo D6 435 engine, a marine diesel engine. So it's one of those samples where I'm pulling up the data, sitting down at my desk, taking a sip of coffee and looking at the numbers and immediately knowing, okay, This is a situation where I'm going to have to relay some bad news, and I just hope that this news either finds a owner who already had an idea of maybe the fact that they're going to need to put money into this, or they're prepared to. You know, it's never fun when it's someone's like daily driver, and sometimes financially it's just not practical to shell out a lot of money for repairs, and those aren't the fun phone calls. But this is a situation where the owner was not only prepared to look into it, they were prepared to find out exactly what was wrong and address it, save the engine, keep that boat out on the water. So here's what we were talking about as far as the results. We had very excessive wear. And when I talk, there should be a more elegant way of describing it, but abnormal would be a way that I would describe some of these wear levels. And as far as abnormal, I've talked a lot in previous episodes about a balance of metals, a shape of metals, what typically should be dominant, what outweighs the other, how they should be stacked against each other. This is an example of a motor where aluminum, which is primarily from the pistons in this engine, well, aluminum read like a whopping 500 plus parts per million. 518 to be exact. If you've looked at a few reports, or if you have any idea what we do, that number should already be striking a chord. It would be high for any metal, let alone metal that's coming from the pistons. So in addition to that, we had a hefty amount of chrome from the rings, and of course iron from cylinders, shafts, copper, lead, and tin from bearings, bushings. It was the whole lineup of metals. Basically anything that could be going wrong was going wrong. And here's where all that metal was coming from. Seawater contamination. Now here's the thing about seawater. It's going to show up as sodium. And when it's, I would say, so prevalent in a sample, you might also find some potassium from it too, albeit not a ton. You'll see sodium far, far outweigh potassium. It's not that 1-to-1 or typical ratio that we're talking about with respect to, glycol-based coolant in engine oil. So we use these same elements to look for two different types of contaminants, but it's obvious which one it is. When you're dealing with sodium being so prevalent and potassium being pretty minor. That alone was an obvious factor in the high wear. So we had to relay the poor wear, the sodium that was indicating seawater, but also the fact that this engine, which this was a port engine, we had to relay the fact that it was wearing so much more than its twin on the starboard side. That is another indicator that something is up. A set of twin engines should wear pretty similarly. Now, I don't want to communicate it as if they need to be replicas. Not even that. We're going to allow for a little bit of variation, and that's normal. If you're the owner of a set of twin engines and you're like, oh, but I had 50 parts per million of iron in my port engine and the starboard engine only had 47. My God, something's wrong. No, it's not to that degree. They should wear pretty similarly. You're going to have some variation, but overall, same balance levels that are in the ballpark. And this was an instance where the port engine was clearly wearing heavily. The starboard, not so much. And then you have the obvious factor of seawater. So by sending in a sample, this owner was able to learn not only was the engine wearing poorly, but a likely reason why. So that gave them a plan of action, what likely issues to look into. And here was what the customer relayed back. The engine was discovered to have excessive blow-by and low compression on 2 cylinders. The center engine blew a seawater hose in the Bahamas. And as a result, that would have allowed water to go directly into the engine's air filter. And here's where that all makes sense. So water through the intake, primarily causing so much metal from the cylinder area. And then obviously, as an engine is wearing heavily to this extent, we're going to find high wear from other sources as well. But you had so much metal from the cylinder area, especially the pistons. And that makes sense given what occurred on the customer's end. Excessive blow-by, that's another likely result of a cylinder area issue. All of it tied together. And as a result of the findings of the report, the customer was able to address it. And that's another note. Frequent listeners probably know what's coming next, but we love getting the feedback where a customer can lend a little more insight on, what a close inspection told them. Did they end up choosing to get it fixed? Are they going to try and just ride it out, monitor it with upcoming samples, so on and so forth? We like knowing what the outcome is. And obviously, if you have questions about, all right, well, what do you think would be a worthwhile, issue to look into? If it's a car, does this look like a head gasket? These are things where if you're sending in a sample and then you want to know about potential issues, ways the contamination might be getting in, so on and so forth, you're always welcome to reach out. And of course, it never hurts to get a pat on the back, have folks let us know, hey, you are on the money. And that wraps up today's topic, but before I let you go, I wanted to give a sincere thank you, express some gratitude for the fantastic reviews that have been popping up, especially on Apple Podcasts. You've taken my request to heart and have been tagging us in your reviews. You've been posting them so we can see, what your feedback is. It's been awesome to hear from y'all. And we love to see those reviews, not just because it helps us gain more visibility, but it's just a confirmation that what we are doing is being appreciated. And that's what keeps us going, is knowing that folks are not only paying attention, they want more. And that is just tremendous to see the feedback. So keep that coming, keep tagging us. And not only will that gain you some swag, it also helps us find more listeners. And that wraps up today's show. This has been Blackstone Joe. Thanks for joining me. I'll be back soon with episode 47. I've talked a lot in previous episodes about a balance of metals, a shape of metals, what typically should be dominant, what outweighs the other, how they should be stacked against each other. So this was it's hard out here for a pimp.